What's up, YouTube? This is another episode of Bullshit. And if you're new to this series, on Bullshit, we expose, we call people out on, as the title implies, their bullshit, their lies, things they're trying to hide, and etc. Now, in this episode of Bullshit, we're going to be talking about the TRAYVON Martin case. Now, of course, some of you may say, oh my God, this dude is so late on this video. Everybody has already done videos on this. That's exactly why I am late on the video. Because with cases like this, you have to sit back and you have to see how the situation plays out. Like, you have to let evidence build up. And if you're a person on YouTube, you know, who makes videos on these subjects, on these topics, then you have to do that, I believe, in order to make more of a complete video. Because that way you have, you know, pretty much everything that you need in order to speak on this topic. So it's a lot of people on YouTube right now that's looking kind of stupid, because the moment they hear something, it's like this alarm that goes off, like they have to be the first person on YouTube to speak on these things, and they have to do the video ASAP. You know what I mean? And it's like a monkey see, monkey do complex that they have. That, you know, like the moment some news come out, that, you know, like they gotta be the one, they gotta be the alertist, they gotta, you know, you gotta hurry up and get that video out, otherwise other people ain't gonna see it. But for people like me, you know, like we just like to sit back and let the facts try to, you know, just develop. That way when we make a video, we won't have to do as many, and you know, we won't have to keep posting updates and, you know, just basically just a bunch of useless videos, you know, basically when you can do just one complete one, you know, like they got 5 or 6 speaking on the exact same subject. So let me just, you know, continue on with the episode. So by this time, you already know what the TRAYVON Martin case is. A neighborhood watchman by the name of George Zimmerman, who is this guy right here, he was riding around in his car, and he said that he seen some black guy in a hoodie who looked suspicious, which was TRAYVON Martin. Now, this is a 17-year-old kid. You know, like he was walking from the corner store back home, and, you know, all he had was some candy for his little brother and a drink, some iced tea, I believe. And, you know, like he turns around and he sees George Zimmerman, you know, like following him for, you know, like just however long, you know. And George Zimmerman, at this time, like he's on the phone with the police, and he's just like explaining, you know, like what the guy looks like. And he said, like, the guy looks like he's on drugs or something, you know, like he, you know. And then you can hear him like literally just mumbling under his breath that, you know, they always get away. Now, I believe the whole story was that there was like some break-ins in like recent months, like around that neighborhood, and maybe he thought TRAYVON was that person, or, you know, or whatever the reason. But, you know, after a person, it was night, and after a certain amount of time during nightfall, you're just walking home from the corner store, and you see this guy just following you, a guy who you don't know, you know, and you're just looking at him like, you know what, fuck this, I'm gonna just run home. And so TRAYVON decides to do that. He decides to run home, and at this point, Zimmerman decides to run after him. Now, the audios have been released, and while Zimmerman chased after TRAYVON, the police officer had heard the footsteps, you know, and he had asked Zimmerman, you know, are you following him? He said, okay, now, we don't need you to do that. Now, this is where it gets hazy. At this point, George Zimmerman said his claim is that he turned around, and, you know, he was going back to his car, and TRAYVON Martin had attacked him from behind, you know, and that's when he shot him. It was basically, you know, some self-defense case that he's claiming. And he said that he had like a broken, bloody nose, and he had like in his head was repeatedly bashed on the concrete by TRAYVON, and he felt like, you know, he had no other choice but to shoot him. Now, this is when the bullshit comes in, because over time, no matter what you do, the truth will develop. You know, all the evidence and the facts will come to light, and you're basically gonna either be shown that you were telling the truth or the fact that you were, you know, telling a lie. And the facts in this case just prove that George Zimmerman was the liar. He claimed that Trayvon Martin had attacked him, had broke his nose, and, you know, repeatedly bashed his head on the concrete. It was a surveillance video released of George Zimmerman being taken into custody by the Sanford police department. And on the surveillance video, you can clearly see that he had no blood on his shirt, you know, because when you break a nose and it was as bloody as he claimed it was, you would have blood all over your shirt. There was no blood on his shirt. And plus he said that he had shot Trayvon Martin from close range, and there was no blood spatters from that either. So that right there shows, okay, he wasn't at close range when you shot him because there's no blood on the shirt. Plus, there's no blood from your injuries, you know, from your nose. Now, he did have like some type of scar on the back of his head or whatever, but he said your head was repeatedly bashed on the concrete. You know how hard concrete is? I'm pretty sure that, you know, that the injury that he had on the back of his head or whatever, it looked old. Now, I'm not sure if that's just like where some skin had just got balled up or whatever, but it didn't really look like, you know, something from that recent incident. Well, that recent, not incident, but that recent, you know, like little situation. So, and the main thing that makes me think that that whole thing isn't the scarring that he's trying to claim it to be is because, one, in this day and age, when you have injuries that he claimed that he had, you would take photogenic evidence. As a matter of fact, the Sanford police are supposed to take evidence of those injuries while they are fresh, right before you go seek medical treatment. They have to take pictures of that. The pictures were never released. And mind you, during this whole time, you know, you had folks trying to make Zimmerman look like the victim here. So those pictures would do nothing but help his case that much more. So there were no x-rays taken. There were no, well, I'm not sure if there were x-rays taken or not, but I don't think they were. And there weren't any pictures released of his injuries, of his said injuries. On top of that, he said that Trayvon Martin had, you know, he was pummeling him. He was beating him up with his fist, and he had broken his nose. They did an autopsy on Trayvon Martin's hands. They didn't find any scarring. They didn't find no bruises. They didn't find any cuts. Basically, they didn't find anything indicating that he was in any type of physical conflict of that magnitude. He wasn't in any fight. You know, so he didn't punch him or anything like that, like he tried to make out, that George Zimmerman tried to make out to be. And, you know, so like that just blows his whole self-defense case out the water right there. Because this all goes back to the fact that he felt like he got out of his car, that like he, when a person is running away from you, you know, unless they stole something from you, or and you're trying to get it back, or unless they, you know, for whatever reason, like when they're running away from you, they're pretty much not a threat. And especially in a case like this, when you've been following him for you know, however long George Zimmerman was following him, Trayvon, you know, he has every right to run away from you because, one, he doesn't know you. Two, you're tailing him, and he's like, fuck it, I'm gonna just run home because this guy looks dangerous, you know. And another thing that the Sanford Police Department didn't, you know, do what they were supposed to. It wasn't determined whether or not George Zimmerman was under the influence of alcohol during this conflict. It sounded like he was, but, you know, like they still got to do tests on the blood. Now, they tested Trayvon Martin's blood for alcohol. They didn't do that with George Zimmerman. And on top of that, after this whole incident, George Zimmerman did not serve any jail time. it is clearly stated that a person is innocent until proven guilty, right? But in between then and, you know, the time you officially go to trial, you're supposed to do jail time, or at least until somebody comes bail you out. George Zimmerman never did any bail time. His lawyers and things like that had came to his rescue and such. So he never served any jail time for shooting TRAYVON and ultimately killing him. Now, like, this is where the whole controversy comes into play with this case, because you have people that has really blown this thing out of proportion. They feel as if it's a race war, and respectfully so, like when you think about it, because under normal circumstances, you know, somebody in George Zimmerman's position would have been arrested. You know what I mean? They would have been arrested. They would have done jail time, opposed from, you know, whatever his race is. You know, Hispanic. Some people say he's Hispanic. Some people he said he's white. Some people say he's half Hispanic, half white. Whatever the case, they have, like, the main thing that we need to look at it that makes it so funny is that, you know, they didn't get him arrested, on top of all the evidence that's clearly right there, and upon the claims that he made. At least they were supposed to, you know, put him in jail for a number of days at least, until somebody can, you know, bail him out. And of course, after this is when set off the whole Trayvon Martin movement and marches and things like that. And then things take a turn for the worst. I mean, like, literally, you have people doing senseless, idiotic shit. You had people like Spike Lee, you know, who is a well-respected movie director. You know, I mean, like, you still have rappers and people quoting his movie, you know, just do the right thing. Ironically enough, Spike Lee did not do the right thing, because he posted a Florida address on his Twitter, and he was like, yo, pass this around. This is where George Zimmerman, you know, lives. And he didn't do the right thing. He just posted it all over the internet, and he had gotten a family forced out of their home. Well, not necessarily forced out, but they felt like they had to leave because they had people, you know, sending them death threats and things like that. They had to go because their life was in danger, pretty much. You know, people want to act all vigilante, but they don't understand that it's a difference between being scared to do something and then being stupid. You know, you don't have to be scared, you know, for justice. Like, you don't have to be scared to, you know, like, just for whatever. But don't be stupid either. This was a stupid move because you got a family forced out of their home. On top of that, there's something else I want to show you. There's something else I want to show you. Now, this is make you choke up. Look at this shit. Look at this shit. It was a party on the 23rd, on the 28th of March, talking about justice for Trayvon. Now, I don't know if you can see it clearly down here, but they clearly say that you can get in free with an empty bag of Skittles before 11. I mean, the kid was 17. And to make it even worse, this was an adult entertainment party. You know, Lingerie Lounge will be wide open with the sexiest entertainment in North Carolina. I mean, really? Like, this kid was 17. He wouldn't even be able to attend this. And I'm just really, you know, shocked as to why you're using, or why you would use, a child's death to try to fill up your club, and you're serving alcohol drinks. So people are going to be in there tipsy as shit. Ain't nobody going to be, focused on Trayvon. So you basically just took the whole meaning out of your title, Justice in memory of Trayvon Martin. By the way, fill up our club, and you get in free with an empty bag of Skittles before 11 p.m. Oh, and they got $3 long iced teas and blue motorcycle. Cheap drinks that's known to have alcohol content in it, strong alcohol content in it. Just inviting people to come get tipsy in the memory of Trayvon Martin, a kid who wouldn't be able to attend this. And the sheer stupidity that people have when it comes to a case like this. For them to even, that's bullshit right there. Like, I'm not even going to go any further at that, because that basically just describes itself. And it's a number of things. I mean, throughout this whole case, and I'm not even talking about the case itself, it's the people surrounding it. You had people who have done everything they can to spit on, Trayvon Martin's case, on his, his reputation, because they tried to dig up some dirt on Trayvon Martin, just to make him, just make him look like even more of a bad guy. Now, what they found on him, on Trayvon Martin, was just this one thing. Prior to the night he got suspended, prior to the night that he was killed, they had found out that he had got suspended from school for having an empty bag that had marijuana, some marijuana residue in it, and he was suspended for that. Of course, when they found this, they really tried to emphasize on it. I mean, they were doing it in the news media, on, comments and things like that, on all over the internet. And, they really tried to push this to try to make it like, see what he got suspended for? And ultimately, what they wanted it to lead to was that, okay, this guy got caught with an empty bag of marijuana residue. That must mean he was dealing. That must mean he was a drug dealer. Ergo, he deserved to die. Ultimately, that's what those people wanted it to lead to. They wanted to play these run for president election, Republican and Democratic, political games and things like that. But, that didn't happen, did it? No, it backfired on them, because people started looking up George Zimmerman's past. Turns out, George Zimmerman, he was arrested. He had run-ins with the law, multiple times before. Two, most notably, he had been in trouble for domestic violence. Yeah, he likes to hit on women. Yeah, that nigga pimp hand strong. And he got in trouble for resisting arrest, both of which he did not serve any jail time. You want to know why? His father is a retired judge who was pulling strings for him to make sure he didn't get any jail time served. Ain't that something? So if that doesn't scream out bullshit, I mean, wow. I understand as a father you want to protect your child, but also as a father you got to know when to back off and let your son deal with the consequences. I understand that because of everything that's happened with this case, it might be a little bit fuzzy, but those first two, like, you really defended your son on those grounds, whatever. But, in this little political game they tried to play with Trayvon versus, George Zimmerman's past and their run-ins with the law, I mean, you got a kid who was suspended with an empty bag that had marijuana residue in it versus somebody who hit women and resisted arrest. Like, honestly, like, who you think has the short end of the stick with that one? I'm just saying. But, yeah, like, you had people doing crazy type of shit. Like, you had people who were trying to defend George Zimmerman, which I don't understand how the hell you can defend this guy, because all the evidence just leads to him, lying about everything that he's made. His self-defense case was about as comical as a Carrot Top joke. You had people making, like, fake Twitters of Trayvon Martin, You had people posting like pictures of like a lot of lookalikes. It was one picture of this kid who looked like Trayvon Martin, but it was confirmed that it wasn't him. You know, like this kid had like gold teeth and everything showing out. And mind you, this is, matter of fact, like let me show you this other picture. Like this picture right here is like one of the more recent pictures that was made. Originally, this was the picture that was shown. And, you know, people complain that, oh, well, you got George Zimmerman back from 2005 when he was taking a mugshot or whatever. And you have this innocent kid on this side picture look. And, you know, what they did was they got so mad about the picture is that they switched it up. Like, they tried to find, they searched the internet to try to find, like the most quote-unquote thuggish picture they could find of Trayvon Martin. And then they took this picture of George Zimmerman, and they had, you know, like just like changed out the pictures. So they had like this, supposedly this thuggish picture of Trayvon Martin, and they had this picture of George Zimmerman. Because they felt like, again, they're playing political games, and they felt if you looked a certain way, people will feel a certain way about you. Ironically enough, this is the exact same thing that ultimately led to Trayvon Martin getting murdered. So, yeah. But for a more and more recent picture of George Zimmerman, this is him in his mugshot because he did, supposedly, like turn himself in, based on what I read. And he's being charged with second-degree murder. And, you know, it's a good thing. You know, the family is happy. All they said was that they wanted an arrest, and they got it. But now here comes the real kick in the balls for me. My whole question is, why the fuck did it take so long for them to arrest this man? Like, seriously, like, they really had more than enough evidence to at least put him in handcuffs. And this is the more recent picture of him. Like, this dude's nose ain't broken. Like, look at this. Are you kidding me? You know, like, whatever. That's, like, we already spoke on that. But how come it took 3, you know, Million Man marches or whatever? How come it took 3 marches nationwide? And how come people had to apply pressure on the Sanford Police Department in order to get an arrest? It's ridiculous. And you wonder why people jump to the conclusion of this being a race war or like whatever. It was because, like, now, me personally, I honestly believe, you know, based on history, you know, it's apparent that every race or every skin color, it's been well documented that people, primarily African Americans, they had to apply pressure in order to get results out of the police department. They had to apply pressure, but they were strategists, and like they knew when to apply pressure, but they also knew when to back off. Right now, this is our time to back off. We don't need to do no more marches or anything like that. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. There was some other things I want to say, but my mind just went blank. So forgive me for that. But yeah, that's it. This episode of bullshit is drawing to a close. If anything we can learn from this case is, one, don't judge a book by its cover. You know, just because a person looked like he's up to something doesn't mean that he is. It's one thing to confront them, you know, or whatever, but it's a whole other thing to start, you know, just making biased assumptions based off how someone looks. I mean, people on the internet, like they were making up any type of little thing that they could make up to try to make, you know, or to try to destroy Trayvon Martin's reputation. I mean, they were making up cases like, I mean, like, they had people on the internet, and I distinctively remember this. They said, oh, what about that case where those black guys had jumped those 2 elderly people and they stole $200? You know, what about that case where, you know, those 3 black guys had jumped that one white guy and, you know, like they like set him on fire. What about that, huh? I mean, for you to even bring up that case, you're trying to say that a person deserves to die based on what other people in the past have done. And I don't even need to go into detail to describe how wrong that is to even make those accusations. But you know, you had people making up shit like, like what about that time when Trayvon Martin had robbed that store, or what about that time he bragged about beating up the bus driver? I mean, they reviewed his Twitter, and he was no more than a kid that, you know, just a regular high school kid who was concerned about sex, girls, and trying to get home early from classes. That was pretty much it. He was a regular high school kid. They didn't find anything about him bragging about beating up bus drivers or whatever. I mean, if this case has taught us anything, it's not racism, it's not prejudice, it's that bullshit still exists. It's just bullshit still exists. Now, I know people are going to be like, oh my God, he said bullshit and he switched to George Zimmerman's current photo. I mean, when you make a self-defense claim and then you run into hiding, I mean, yeah, people can say that, oh, he would have been beaten up, or, you know, he would have been death threat. I mean, he should have just turned himself in from the beginning instead of running away. I mean, if you're the victim, you know, if you honestly believe in your self-defense case, and your lawyers believe in you too. By the way, his lawyers had decided to quit on him, pretty much because they had said that, you know, George Zimmerman had lost contact with him, and it was understandably so. I mean, if I'm a defense attorney and I'm trying to make contact with you, and you're my client, and you know, just lose contact with me, like you don't answer my texts, my calls, my emails, or whatever, then pretty much I can't do anything for you. So I'm going to have to, until further notice, I'm going to have to, you know, leave your case. And that's what they ended up doing. But he did get a new lawyer, and I'm guessing this current lawyer had convinced him to turn himself in. And, you know, he's being charged with second-degree murder. But don't get your hopes up, because, like I said, it took forever for them to just arrest this guy. The amount of work that it took for them to get an arrest, it took marches, it took just a lot of shit in order for him to get arrested. And who knows what it's going to take for this dude to get found guilty. You know, they found that his nose wasn't broken. There wasn't any photogenic evidence of his injuries, so, you know, and they didn't test his blood for alcohol, so it wasn't determined if he was, you know, really like under the influence that night. So yeah, all we can do is just hope for the best, and you know, we can just hope that Trayvon Martin gets justice. And with that being said, this concludes this episode of Bullshit. I'm Azariel, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.